The great chamber of the Galactic Council floated in the darkness of space, a massive station that had witnessed 12,000 years of peace. Inside its crystalline walls, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to discuss matters that affected entire star systems. Today the mood was tense. The Zorakian Dominion had brought a proposal that made the elder races deeply uncomfortable. Commander Vector stood at the center of the chamber, his scaled form reflecting the ambient light. He was young by the standards of his people, ambitious and hungry for glory. His presentation showed detailed maps of the sectors near the Sol system, highlighting 3 small human colonies that sat in territory the Dominion claimed as historically theirs. His argument was simple and direct. These colonies violated ancient boundaries. The humans were newcomers who did not understand or respect the old ways. The Dominion would take these worlds back by force if necessary. The chamber remained silent as Vector finished speaking. Then slowly, the eldest member of the Kael'thar rose to respond. Morethus was ancient beyond measure, his crystalline body dimmed by countless centuries of life. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of ages. "We have heard your claim, Commander Vector, but before this council makes any decision, you must hear our warning. Stay away from the humans. Do not engage them in conflict. Do not threaten their colonies. Do not test their patience." Vector's confidence did not waver. He had expected this resistance from the old ones. They always counseled caution, always preferred endless talk to decisive action. With respect, Elder Morethus, the humans are barely more than primitives. They achieved faster than light travel only 2 generations ago. Their ships are simple constructs of metal and fusion engines. Their weapons are kinetic and chemical. They pose no threat to the Dominion. A rippling sound filled the chamber as the Vexery Elder shifted its gaseous form. Its voice came from everywhere at once, a whisper that penetrated every mind. "You do not understand. We do not warn you because humans are strong. We warn you because of what they become when they are pushed." Vector allowed himself a small smile. "The Dominion has faced many enemies. We are not afraid of a species that has barely left its own star system." The Luminary representative, a being of pure thought housed in a mechanical form, spoke next. "There are records, Commander. Very old records from the time before the Council was formed. We have encountered humanity before, in a manner of speaking. Fragments of data from probe ships that ventured near their world thousands of years ago. The observations were troubling." "Troubling how?" Vector asked, his tone making clear that he considered this ancient history irrelevant. Morethus gestured, and the chamber's central display changed. It showed data streams, analysis reports, behavioral studies. All of it was ancient. The kind of information that had been passed down through so many translations and interpretations that its accuracy was questionable. But the elder races took it seriously. "Humans are adaptable beyond any species we have encountered," Morethus explained. "They evolved on a death world, a planet that tried to kill them in every possible way. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, temperature extremes. They survived by becoming the most dangerous thing on their planet. Then they turned that survival instinct into exploration, creativity, and yes, warfare." Vector studied the data with growing skepticism. "These are just evolutionary traits. Many species have overcome difficult homeworlds." "Not like this," the Vexery whispered. "Humans have a saying that our linguists have studied extensively. They say that necessity is the mother of invention. When humans face an obstacle, they do not simply overcome it. They fundamentally change their approach. They innovate. They adapt. They refuse to accept that anything is impossible." The Luminary added its thoughts. "In warfare, this makes them unpredictable. Other species follow established patterns, proven tactics, conventional wisdom. Humans throw out the rulebook the moment it stops working. They will use anything as a weapon. They will sacrifice anything to protect their own. They will fight in ways that make no logical sense until you realize they are operating on principles we do not share." Vector's patience was wearing thin. "These are just theories based on ancient observations of a primitive culture. The humans I have studied are traders and farmers. They have a small defense force, but nothing that compares to the Dominion military. Their colonies are barely defended. This will be a simple operation." Another voice joined the conversation, this one from a younger species that had more recent contact with humanity. The Torvian ambassador stepped forward, her fur bristling with obvious agitation. "I have met humans, Commander. I have traded with them. They are friendly, curious, and generous. But I have also seen how they react to threats. 5 years ago, a pirate clan attacked one of their cargo vessels. The ship was unarmed, carrying medical supplies to a colony. The pirates killed 12 crew members. She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. The human response was not proportional. It was absolute. They hunted down every single pirate involved. It took them 3 months, and they crossed into 5 different territorial jurisdictions to do it. They ignored diplomatic protests. They ignored threats. They found every pirate who participated in that attack and brought them to justice. Not because the cargo was valuable, because 12 humans had died. Vector waved a dismissive hand. An emotional response to terrorism, not relevant to military conflict between nations. You are not hearing what we are trying to tell you, Morithus said. And for the first time, there was urgency in his ancient voice. Humans do not think like we do. They do not calculate cost versus benefit in the way we understand. When you attack them, especially when you harm their civilians, you are not starting a war. You are creating an existential enemy. They will not stop until they have achieved what they consider justice. The Zorakian commander had heard enough. The Dominion respects the wisdom of the elder races, but we cannot allow outdated fears to dictate our territorial rights. The 3 colonies in question are in disputed space. We will offer the humans the chance to evacuate peacefully. If they refuse, we will remove them by force. This is our final position. Morithus looked at Vector with something that might have been pity. Then we cannot stop you. But know this, Commander. When the fighting starts, remember that we tried to warn you. Remember that we told you what would happen. And when it is over, when the price has been paid, come back to this chamber and tell us if we were wrong. The vote was taken. The Dominion had the right to enforce what they claimed were legitimate territorial boundaries. The elder races abstained, refusing to support the action but unable to prevent it under council law. The younger species, seeing an opportunity to appear strong, voted in favor. The resolution passed. Vector left the chamber feeling vindicated. The old ones were afraid of shadows and myths. The Dominion would show them what real power looked like. He returned to his flagship and began issuing orders to his fleet. 300 warships would be more than enough to handle a few underfended colonies. As his ships prepared to leave council space, Vector reviewed the intelligence reports one more time. The human colonies were small and isolated. New Bakersfield was a farming settlement with 40,000 inhabitants. Haven's Rest was a mining operation with even fewer people. New Providence was the largest, a trading post with perhaps 60,000 souls. None of them had significant military installations. Some orbital defense platforms, a few patrol ships, nothing that could stand against a Dominion battle fleet. What the intelligence reports did not mention, because the Dominion analysts had dismissed it as irrelevant, was that every human colony had extensive underground shelter systems, bunkers designed to protect the entire population from orbital bombardment. Stockpiles of food, water, and medical supplies that could last for months. Communication arrays that were hardened against jamming. These things seemed like paranoid over-preparation to the Zorakians. They did not understand that humans built their colonies expecting the worst, hoping for the best, and preparing for everything in between. Vector stood on the bridge of his flagship as the fleet entered hyperspace. His officers were confident, joking about how quickly they would complete the mission. Some were already planning the victory celebrations. None of them noticed the small expression of concern on their commander's face, the tiny seed of doubt that Morithus had planted with his warnings. Far away in the human sector, automated monitoring stations detected the Zorakian fleet's departure from Council space. The information was flagged and forwarded to military intelligence. Analysts began tracking the fleet's trajectory, calculating possible destinations. When the numbers came back pointing at the 3 outer colonies, alarms began to sound in places the Zorakians did not know existed. Admiral Helen Grant received the briefing in her office on Earth. She was a career officer, someone who had seen enough of the galaxy to know that peace was fragile and threats were real. She read the report twice, then activated a secure channel to the colonies. The message was simple. Prepare for possible hostile action. Evacuate to shelters if necessary. Do not engage unless fired upon. The morning sun was just breaking over the horizon of New Bakersfield when the first alarms began to sound. The colony had been awake for hours already, as farming communities always were. Fields of modified wheat stretched for miles, swaying in the gentle breeze. The air smelled of earth and growing things. A small piece of humanity transplanted to a world 40 light-years from Earth. Lieutenant Jack Morrison was sitting in his sister's kitchen, drinking coffee and watching his niece and nephew argue about whose turn it was to feed the chickens. He was on leave, taking a break from his duties aboard the ESS Defiant to visit family. Katie, his older sister, was making breakfast and telling him about the colony's plans to expand the irrigation system. It was peaceful, ordinary, exactly the kind of morning that made Jack remember why he had joined the fleet in the first place. To protect moments like this. Then the sirens cut through the morning calm like a knife. Jack was on his feet before the sound finished its first wail. Katie dropped the spatula she had been holding, her face going pale. The children stopped arguing and looked at their mother with wide, frightened eyes. They had practiced for this. Every human colony practiced for this. But nobody had really believed it would happen. Shelter. Now, Jack said, his voice calm but firm. He grabbed his nephew with one hand and his niece with the other, already moving toward the door. Katie was right behind him, snatching up the emergency kit that every household kept by the entrance. Outside, the streets were filling with people, all moving in the same direction. No panic, no screaming. Everyone knew the drill. The shelters were built deep underground, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. They had enough supplies to keep the entire colony alive for 6 months if necessary. But as Jack ran with his family toward the nearest entrance, he found himself praying they would not need that long. Above them, the sky began to change. Streaks of light appeared, growing brighter. Ships dropping out of hyperspace, too many to count. Jack's military training kicked in, and he estimated numbers even as he ran. At least 300 vessels, maybe more. This was not a patrol or a warning shot. This was an invasion force. They reached the shelter entrance just as the first plasma bolts began to fall. The sound was like thunder, but deeper, more terrible. Jack pushed the children through the door and turned to help others who were still running toward safety. An elderly man stumbled, and Jack caught him, half carrying him the last few yards. Katie was screaming his name, begging him to come inside, but he stayed at the entrance until the last person was through. The bombardment intensified. Buildings began to explode, turned to rubble and fire by weapons designed to level cities. Jack took one last look at the sky, now filled with alien ships, and then dove through the shelter entrance. The heavy blast door slammed shut behind him, and suddenly the world went quiet except for the muffled thuds of explosions from above. The shelter was huge, an underground complex that stretched for miles. Emergency lighting cast everything in a pale glow. Families huddled together, children crying, adults trying to stay calm. Katie found Jack and grabbed him in a fierce hug, her own children pressed between them. She was shaking, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "What's happening?" "Who are they?" Jack did not have a good answer. He had been briefed on potential threats before his leave, but nothing had suggested an attack was imminent. "I don't know, but they made a mistake coming here." He pulled out his military communicator, a device that was supposed to work even through planetary shielding and jamming. It took 3 tries before he got a connection, and even then it was breaking up. He sent a message on the emergency channel, knowing it would be received by every military vessel and station in human space. 3 words that would tell them everything they needed to know. They fired first. Then the jamming intensified and the connection died completely. Jack sat down with his back against the wall. Katie and the children pressed against his side and waited. Around them, the colony administrators were organizing people, setting up medical stations, distributing food and water. Humanity had learned long ago that survival required preparation, organization, and the will to endure. Above ground, Zorakian troops were landing in dropships. Commander Vector watched from orbit as his ground forces secured the colony. Or tried to. The settlement was deserted, every building empty. His soldiers found farms and homes and shops, but no people. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished. "Where are they?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Underground, sir. Sensor scans show extensive tunnel systems beneath the colony. The humans built shelters, very deep shelters. We would need to dig them out." Vector considered this. He had expected token resistance followed by quick surrender. This was something else. The humans had evacuated their entire population in the time it took his fleet to enter orbit and begin bombardment. That level of coordination suggested they had been expecting an attack. How long to breach the shelters? The tactical officer consulted his screens. "With our current equipment, weeks at minimum. The shelters are reinforced with materials designed to withstand sustained bombardment. We could eventually break through, but it would be costly. This was not going according to plan. Vector made a decision. Leave a garrison to monitor the situation. The rest of the fleet moves to the second target. Perhaps Haven's Rest will be more cooperative, but Haven's Rest was exactly the same. Empty buildings, deserted streets, the entire population safely underground before the Zorakian fleet even arrived. The mining colony had shelters built into the very tunnels they used for extracting ore. Finding them would be nearly impossible. New Providence, the third and largest colony, proved identical. By the time Vector's fleet arrived at the trading post, the population had already evacuated. The Zorakians claimed 3 empty worlds, standing in deserted streets beneath alien suns, wondering where everyone had gone. Vector returned to his flagship, feeling deeply uneasy. On paper, the mission was a success. They had taken the 3 colonies without losing a single ship or soldier. But something was wrong. The humans had been too prepared, too organized. It was as if they had known this was coming and had spent years getting ready for it. What he did not know, could not know, was that humanity had indeed been preparing. Not for this specific attack, but for the possibility of any attack. When humans spread to the stars, they brought with them the hard lessons of their history. They knew that the universe was not always friendly, that peace could shatter in an instant, that safety was something you built with your own hands or not at all. Every colony had shelters. Every settlement had evacuation plans. Every family knew what to do when the siren sounded. This was not paranoia. This was wisdom bought with the blood of ancestors who had learned the cost of being unprepared. Deep in the shelter beneath New Bakersfield, Jack Morrison sat with his communicator in his hand, hoping for a signal that would tell him help was coming. Katie kept the children occupied with games and stories, maintaining a sense of normalcy even as the world above them burned. Around them, other families did the same. Teachers held classes in empty corridors. Doctors treated the few injuries from the evacuation. Engineers monitored the shelter systems, making sure air and water and power continued to flow. Humanity endured. It was what they were good at. Jack's communicator suddenly came to life with a burst of static. He quickly adjusted the frequency, trying to find a clear channel. For a moment he heard nothing but noise. Then, cutting through the interference, a voice. Military channel, encrypted, but his communicator automatically decoded it. This is ESS Defiant to all personnel. If you are receiving this message, know that help is coming. The fleet has been mobilized. Hold your positions. We are coming for you. Jack closed his eyes and felt something loosen in his chest. The Defiant was his ship. Those were his crewmates. They were coming. He turned to Katie and saw the hope and fear mixed in her expression. What happens now? She asked. Jack thought about the message he had sent. Those 3 words that would have reached military command hours ago. He thought about what those words meant, the protocols they would activate, the response they would trigger. He had served in the fleet long enough to know that humanity's military was not like other species. They did not simply defend. They did not calculate proportional responses. When someone threatened human civilians, especially children, the response was always the same. Overwhelming force. Complete victory. No mercy for those who started it. Now, Jack said quietly, the Zorakians learn why the elders told them to stay away from us. In orbit above the 3 colonies, Zorakian garrison forces settled in for what they expected to be a long occupation. They set up monitoring stations, deployed patrol ships, began the slow process of trying to locate and breach the human shelters. The work was tedious and difficult, but they had time. The humans were trapped underground with limited supplies. Eventually, they would have to surrender. What the Zorakians did not detect, could not detect with their current technology, were the reconnaissance drones that had begun appearing at the edge of each star system. Small, stealthy, nearly invisible. The ESS Defiant emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the New Bakersfield system, with 97 other ships. It was not the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, but it was the first time they had deployed their newest vessels in actual combat. Ships that the Galactic Council did not know existed, built in secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and behind the moons of gas giants. Captain Danny Wright stood on the bridge of the Defiant, studying the tactical display. The Zorakian garrison consisted of about 70 ships in orbit around New Bakersfield, with similar numbers at the other two colonies. The main Dominion fleet, 230 ships under Commander Vector, had withdrawn to a nearby system to await further orders. Communications. Send the message we prepared, Danny ordered. The message was simple and brief. It went out on all frequencies in every language the Zorakians might understand. You have attacked human civilians without provocation. You have exactly 1 hour to withdraw from all 3 colonies and return to your own space. After that, we will consider every Zorakian vessel in this sector to be a hostile target. This is your only warning. On the Zorakian flagship in orbit above New Bakersfield, the garrison commander received the message and immediately forwarded it to Vector. The response came back quickly. Do not withdraw. Maintain position. Reinforcements are coming. The garrison commander stared at his sensor readings. The human fleet was smaller than his own, but something about those ships made him nervous. They were strange designs, unlike anything in the intelligence reports. Sleeker, more compact, with energy signatures that his sensors could not fully identify. The hour passed. The human fleet did not move closer, did not make any aggressive gestures. They simply waited at the edge of the system, holding position. The garrison commander began to think they were bluffing. Then, without any warning, the human ships opened fire. The range was impossible. They were still millions of kilometers away, far beyond the effective range of any weapon system the Zorakians knew about. But the humans were not using conventional weapons. The railguns mounted on their ships accelerated tungsten projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. At those velocities, even a small slug carried devastating kinetic energy. The first Zorakian ship died without ever knowing it was under attack. The projectile punched through its shields as if they did not exist, penetrated the hull and detonated inside the ship's fusion reactor. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. The garrison commander screamed orders, trying to organize a defense against an enemy that was killing his ships from a range where he could not effectively return fire. His vessels began to scatter, breaking formation, attempting to close the distance. But the humans had planned for this. Missiles launched from the human fleet, hundreds of them, each one maneuvering with an intelligence that suggested individual AI guidance. They dodged point defense fire, cooperated with each other to overwhelm targets, and struck with precision that was terrifying to witness. Within the first 10 minutes of engagement, the garrison had lost 20 ships. The commander made a decision. All vessels retreat to hyperspace. We cannot fight them at this range. But retreating was not as simple as jumping away. Hyperspace required calculations, preparation time. Ships had to align themselves properly, charge their drives, enter the right trajectory. It took minutes, and the humans were not giving them minutes. Jack Morrison stood at his station on the Defiant, coordinating targeting solutions with the tactical team. Every officer on the bridge worked with focused intensity. No wasted words, no unnecessary chatter. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. Now they executed with the precision of professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. Target the command ships first, Captain Wright ordered. Cut off their coordination. The Defiant's railguns spoke again, sending projectiles downrange at velocities that made them nearly impossible to intercept. Another Zorakian vessel died, this one the garrison commander's flagship. The commander himself survived, ejected in an escape pod, but his fleet was now leaderless and panicking. Within 30 minutes, the garrison over New Bakersfield was destroyed. A few ships managed to escape to hyperspace, but most were turned into expanding clouds of debris. The human fleet did not celebrate. They immediately split into 3 groups, one for each colony, and began the systematic elimination of every Zorakian presence in human space. Commander Vector received the reports in his command center and felt something he had not experienced. In his entire military career, fear. Real, genuine fear. His garrison forces were being destroyed by a smaller human fleet, using weapons and tactics that made no sense according to everything he knew about warfare. How are they achieving this range? He demanded of his science officer. The projectiles are relativistic, sir. They accelerate them to nearly 1/10 light speed. At those velocities, our shields cannot stop them, and our point defense systems cannot track them fast enough. What about their missiles? Each one appears to have its own guidance system. They communicate with each other, coordinate attacks, adapt to our defensive measures in real time. It is like fighting 100 small pilots instead of simple missiles. Vector stared at the tactical display. The humans had just demonstrated technology, that was supposed to be decades beyond what the intelligence reports suggested. Either those reports were catastrophically wrong, or humanity had been hiding their true capabilities from the galactic community. Prepare the fleet for combat. We cannot let them retake the colonies without a fight. His officers looked uncertain. The garrison forces had been destroyed with minimal human losses. What made Vector think the main fleet would fare better? But orders were orders. The Dominion fleet, 230 ships, moved to intercept the human force heading for Haven's Rest. This time, Vector was determined to dictate the terms of engagement. He would force the humans to fight at close range, where his numerical superiority would matter. The human fleet detected the Dominion movement and adjusted course. Admiral Helen Grant, directing operations from Earth, watched the tactical situation develop. She had expected this. The Zorakians would try to use their numbers, would try to get close enough to bring their full firepower to bear. She sent new orders to the fleet. Commanders, engage. Show them what happens when you threaten. As the two fleets met in the space between Haven's Rest and its primary star, the Zorakians came in fast, trying to close the distance, trying to get inside the range where the human railguns would be less effective. They expected a conventional battle, ships maneuvering and exchanging fire until one side or the other was forced to withdraw. They did not get a conventional battle. The human ships did something that violated every principle of space combat the Zorakians understood. When their weapons became less effective at close range, they switched tactics entirely. Ships that had been firing railguns suddenly deployed close-range energy weapons, lasers, and particle beams that cut through Zorakian hulls like torches through paper. When Zorakian vessels damaged human ships beyond immediate repair, the humans did not retreat or abandon those vessels. They used them as weapons, setting collision courses and turning crippled ships into massive kinetic missiles that destroyed everything they struck. When the Zorakians tried to jam human communications, the humans switched to quantum-entangled systems that could not be interfered with. When the Zorakians adapted their shields to better defend against one weapon type, the humans immediately switched to a different weapon. They fought with a flexibility and ruthlessness that made Vector realize too late what the elders had been trying to tell him. Humans did not fight to win according to the rules. They fought to win, period, and they would use any method, any tactic, any weapon that achieved that goal. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Dominion fleet was running for their lives, having lost over half their ships. The human fleet pursued them across 2 systems, destroying any vessel that did not surrender immediately and completely. They broadcast captured communications on open channels, letting every Zorakian ship hear their comrades begging for mercy, hear their officers ordering retreats that never came fast enough. It was psychological warfare at a level the Zorakians had never experienced. The humans were not just defeating them militarily, they were breaking their will to fight. Back on New Bakersfield, Jack Morrison felt the vibrations through the shelter walls as human dropships landed on the surface. The communication system crackled to life with a message everyone had been praying to hear. This is the ESS Defiant to New Bakersfield Colony. The Zorakian garrison has been eliminated. It is safe to return to the surface. Repeat, it is safe to return to the surface. The shelters erupted in cheers, people crying and hugging each other. Katie grabbed Jack and held on like she would never let go. The children were jumping and shouting, not fully understanding what had happened, but knowing that the nightmare was over. They made their way to the surface slowly, carefully, not quite believing it was real. When Jack stepped out into daylight again, he saw human Marines securing the area. Engineers already beginning damage. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of the first reports reaching the chamber. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered in the crystalline halls, all of them talking at once, all of them demanding answers. The news from the human sectors had spread like wildfire. The Zorakian fleet, one of the most powerful military forces in the known galaxy, had been shattered by a smaller human force in what could only be described as a completely one-sided engagement. The Zorakian ambassador stood before the council, his scales pale with stress. He had been a minor diplomatic official just days ago, but with most of the senior leadership either dead or disgraced, he had been thrust into a position he was not prepared for. Now he had to stand before the assembled powers of the galaxy and explain how his people had managed to provoke the one species the elders had specifically warned them away from. Honored members of the council, he began, his voice shaking slightly. The Dominion requests immediate intervention in the conflict with humanity. The human military has committed acts of aggression far beyond any proportional response. They have destroyed over 150 of our vessels. They have pursued our retreating forces across multiple systems, ignoring territorial boundaries. They have executed captured officers without trial. This is not warfare as civilized species conduct it. This is barbarism. He activated the chamber's display system, showing footage from the battle, Zorakian ships exploding, escape pods being targeted, damaged vessels being used as projectiles. It looked brutal and merciless, exactly the kind of warfare the Council had spent thousands of years trying to eliminate from galactic society. But then the human ambassador requested permission to speak. Carl Bennett was a former Marine who had seen combat on 3 different worlds before retiring and joining the diplomatic corps. He was a large man with graying hair and scars that told stories he rarely shared. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire chamber. I would like to provide some context that the Zorakian ambassador seems to have forgotten to mention, Carl said. He activated his own display, showing different footage. Zorakian ships bombarding New Bakersfield from orbit, buildings exploding, a school collapsing as children were being evacuated, medical centers destroyed, farming equipment turned to slag. This is what the Dominion did before our fleet arrived. They attacked civilian targets without warning. They gave no chance for negotiation or surrender. They just started killing people. Men, women, children, farmers, teachers, doctors, people who had never held a weapon in their lives. He let the images speak for themselves. The council chamber fell silent as representatives watched the bombardment footage. It was one thing to hear reports of an attack. It was another to see it happening, to watch civilians running for their lives while military-grade plasma rained down on them. The Dominion claims we executed captured officers, Carl continued. That is correct, we did. Specifically, we executed 17 officers who gave the direct orders to target civilian population centers. Under the laws of warfare that this council established, deliberately targeting civilians is a war crime. The punishment for war crimes, as defined by this council's own charter, is death. We followed your laws, not ours. If we had followed human law, we would have executed far more of them. The Zorakian ambassador tried to object, but Carl held up a hand. You want to talk about proportional response? Let me explain something about humans that you clearly do not understand. When you attack our civilians, when you kill our children, there is no such thing as a proportional response. There is only one response. We remove the threat completely. We make sure it never happens again, and we make the cost so high that nobody else will be tempted to try. A representative from one of the younger species stood. Ambassador Bennett, surely you can see that your actions risk destabilizing the entire galactic order. If every species responded to aggression with such overwhelming force, we would return to the chaos of the ancient times. Carl looked at the representative for a long moment. The galactic order did not stop the Zorakians from attacking us. Your laws did not protect our colonies. Your council gave them permission to use force against civilian settlements. So forgive me if we are not overly concerned about maintaining an order that failed to prevent this war in the first place. Elder Marethus rose from his seat, his crystalline form glowing softly in the chamber's light. Ambassador Bennett, I understand your anger. I understand your pain. But you must understand our concern. Your species has demonstrated military capabilities that far exceed what we believed you possessed. Your tactics are unlike anything we have seen in thousands of years. You fight with a ruthlessness that frightens even the oldest races. We warned the Dominion for good reasons. Then perhaps, Carl said quietly, you should have done more than just warn them. Perhaps you should have prevented them from attacking in the first place. Instead, you abstained from the vote. You allowed this to happen. And now you are concerned because we defended ourselves too effectively? The Vexery Elder shifted its gaseous form, its voice whispering through every mind in the chamber. We understand that you see our caution as weakness, but you must understand what we see when we look at humanity. We see a species that evolves through conflict. Every obstacle you face makes you stronger. Every enemy you fight teaches you new ways to kill. You are only 2 generations into space travel, and already your weapons are more advanced than species that have been exploring the stars for millennia. What will you be capable of in another century? In another 1,000 years? Carl was quiet for a moment, considering his response. When he spoke again, his tone was softer but no less firm. You want to know what we will be capable of? That depends entirely on how we are treated. If we are welcomed as equals, if we are allowed to trade and share knowledge and build relationships, then we will be the best allies you could ask for. We will share our technology. We will defend your borders as if they were our own. We will stand beside you against any threat. He paused, letting that sink in. But if we are treated as threats, if we are attacked, if our civilians are targeted, then yes, you will see what we are capable of when we are enemies. And I promise you, nobody wants to see that. The chamber erupted in discussion, representatives arguing with each other, species taking sides. Some agreed with Carl that humanity had every right to defend themselves aggressively. Others insisted that the human response was excessive and dangerous. The younger species saw opportunity to gain favor by supporting one side or the other. The elder races remained cautiously neutral, watching and evaluating. Meanwhile, at the border of Zorakian space, the human fleet waited. Admiral Helen Grant had positioned her forces just outside Dominion territory, close enough to be threatening, but not close enough to be considered an invasion. It was a message. We can be here whenever we want. We can end you whenever we choose. The only question is whether you give us a reason to. Commander Vector, stripped of his rank and awaiting trial, watched from a detention facility as his government scrambled to respond to human demands. The list was extensive and non-negotiable. Full reparations for all damages to the 3 colonies. Compensation for every life lost. Extradition of all officers involved in planning or executing the attack. A public apology and acknowledgement that the Dominion had violated council law by targeting civilians. And finally, a guarantee that Zorakian forces would never enter human space again without explicit permission. The Dominion leadership wanted to refuse. They wanted to rally their remaining forces and continue the fight. But when they ran the simulations, when they calculated the probable outcome of continued warfare against humanity, the numbers were terrifying. The humans had destroyed over half their fleet while losing barely a dozen ships. If the war continued, the Dominion would cease to exist as a military power within months. They had no choice. They agreed to every demand. Back on Earth, Carl Bennett received confirmation of the Zorakian agreement. He stood in his office looking out at the planet below and felt no satisfaction in the victory. Too many people had died. Too many families had been broken. The 3 colonies were safe now, but the scars would remain for generations. His assistant entered the office. Ambassador, the Council has requested a formal meeting with you. They want to discuss humanity's membership status. Carl raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. They want to offer us full membership, a permanent seat, maybe even a position among the elder races. How did you know? Because they are scared. They just watched us dismantle one of their major military powers in less than a week. They want to make sure we are inside the tent where they can keep an eye on us, rather than outside where we might become a threat. He turned from the window and grabbed his jacket. Tell them I will attend the meeting. And prepare a statement about our conditions for membership. Conditions, sir? Carl smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Yes, conditions. If they want us in their council, they are going to have to make some changes, starting with better enforcement of their laws against targeting civilians. We are not going through this again. 6 months after the war ended, Jack Morrison walked through the streets of New Bakersfield with his family, and for the first time since the attack, everything felt almost normal. The colony had been rebuilt better than before. Zorakian reparations had funded not just reconstruction, but improvements. New buildings, better infrastructure, advanced defensive systems that would make any future attack nearly impossible. Katie's children ran ahead of them, laughing and chasing each other between shops that had been rubble half a year ago. The scars were still there if you looked closely. Newer construction stood next to older buildings. Memorial plaques marked places where people had died in the bombardment. But life continued. Humanity's ability to rebuild, to adapt, to carry on despite trauma was on full display. It is strange, Katie said as they walked. I was so angry after the attack. I wanted them to pay, wanted them to hurt like we hurt. But now that it is over, I just feel tired. Jack understood. He had felt the same exhaustion when he returned to duty on the Defiant. The adrenaline and rage that had carried them through the war had faded, leaving only the weight of what had happened. The elders told me something when I was at the council for the victory ceremony. They said that humans feel deeply both love and hate, joy and anger. That is our strength and our weakness. They stopped at a memorial park that had been built where the colony school once stood. Names were carved into black stone, all the people who had not made it to the shelters in time. 73 names from New Bakersfield alone, thousands more across all 3 colonies. Jack found himself reading each name, remembering that everyone represented someone's child, parent, sibling, friend. "Do you think it was worth it?" Katie asked quietly. "All the destruction, all the death. Do you think we accomplished anything other than revenge?" Jack thought about that question carefully. "I think we taught the galaxy something important. That there are consequences for targeting civilians. That humanity will not accept being victimized. Before this, we were just another species trying to fit in. Now everyone knows what we are capable of, for better or worse." At the Galactic Council, that lesson was being learned by everyone, not just the Zorakians. In the months following humanity's admission as full members, the entire structure of galactic politics had shifted. Species that had ignored humanity before now sought trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Military planners across the galaxy studied the battle records, trying to understand human tactics and develop counters that might work. But more importantly, the laws protecting civilians during warfare were strengthened, and enforcement mechanisms were put in place. The Council established a rapid response force that could intervene if any member species violated these laws. Nobody said it explicitly, but everyone understood the real reason for these changes. They did not want to give humanity another reason to demonstrate their military capabilities. Ambassador Carl Bennett attended every council session, advocating for human interest but also building genuine relationships with other species. He discovered that many of them had their own stories of being threatened or attacked by stronger neighbors. Humanity's willingness to stand up to aggression, to fight back despite the odds, resonated with these smaller species. They began to see humanity not as scary barbarians but as potential protectors. One day, Carl received a private message requesting a meeting with Elder Morethus. They met in one of the council station's observation chambers, looking out at the stars while they talked. The Kael'thar Elder's crystalline form refracted the starlight into patterns of color that danced across the walls. "I wanted to apologize," Morethus said without preamble. "The Elder races knew what might happen if the Zorakians attacked your colonies. We warned them, but we did not stop them. We allowed the vote to proceed. We are responsible for what followed." Carl was quiet for a moment, surprised by the admission. "Why did you not do more? You have the power to block council actions. You could have prevented the authorization." "We could have," Morethus agreed. "But there is a principle in galactic politics that the Elder races have followed for thousands of years. We advise, we warn, we counsel, but we do not rule. We believe that the younger species needed to learn from their own mistakes. We did not anticipate the cost would be so high." "People died because of that decision," Carl said, his voice hard. "Human people, yes, but also Zorakians. Young soldiers following orders, doing what they thought was right. All of them dead because nobody was willing to step in and prevent a stupid war." "You are correct," Morethus said, "and that is why I am apologizing. The Elder races have reconsidered our position. We can no longer stand aside and allow tragedy to unfold when we have the power to prevent it. From now on, we will take a more active role in maintaining peace." Carl nodded slowly. "That is good. But it is not enough. The problem was not just that you did not stop them. The problem was that the Zorakians did not understand what they were dealing with. Your warnings were too vague, too mythical. They sounded like old stories, not real threats. What would you suggest?" "Honesty," Carl said. "When humanity first joined the galactic community, we shared our history. We told you about our wars, our conflicts, our capacity for violence, but we also told you about our capacity for cooperation, creation, and compassion. We were honest about who we are. The Council should do the same. Do not just warn species away from potential conflicts. Explain clearly what the consequences will be. Help them understand what they are risking." Morethus considered this. "You propose a fundamental change in how the Council operates. More transparency, more direct intervention. This will not be popular with all members." "Neither was humanity joining the Council," Carl pointed out. "But here we are. Sometimes change is necessary, even when it is uncomfortable." The Elder considered this, the light patterns shifting across the chamber walls. "I will bring your suggestions to the other Elder races. You may be right. Perhaps it is time for the old ways to evolve." Back on Earth, Admiral Helen Grant stood in a classified briefing room, reviewing reports on humanity's expanded military capabilities. The war had revealed their secret projects to the entire galaxy, but it had also shown which technologies worked and which needed improvement. New ships were being designed, better weapons developed, defensive systems upgraded. A junior officer approached with a data pad. "Admiral, we have requests from 17 different species asking for joint military exercises and technology sharing agreements. What should we tell them?" Helen thought about it. "Accept the exercises with species that supported us in the Council. As for technology sharing, that depends on what they are offering in return. We are willing to be generous with friends, but we are not giving away our advantages for nothing." The officer nodded and left. Helen turned back to the reports, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about the war, about the decisions she had made, about the young sailors and Marines who had followed her orders into combat. Some of them had not come home. Their names were on memorial walls across human space now, honored but still dead. Had it been worth it? The strategic answer was yes. Humanity had secured its place in galactic politics, demonstrated its strength, and ensured that future threats would think twice before attacking. But the personal answer was more complicated. Every death weighed on her, every family that had lost someone because of decisions she had made. A message appeared on her screen. It was from Jack Morrison requesting reassignment. He wanted to transfer from active combat duty to a diplomatic escort position. The request included a personal note. "I have seen enough war, Admiral. I would like to help prevent the next one instead of fighting it." Helen approved the request immediately. People like Jack, who understood both military necessity and the cost of violence, were exactly what humanity needed in the new galactic order. Soldiers who could talk as well as fight, warriors who preferred peace but were ready for war. At a military academy on one of the core worlds, a class of young Zorakian officers studied tactical recordings from the human conflict. Their instructor, a survivor of the battle at Haven's Rest, paused the display at a critical moment when human ships had adapted their tactics mid-battle. "Notice how they shift weapon systems without any apparent coordination," the instructor said. "Each ship appears to make independent decisions, but the overall effect is coordinated. This is what we call distributed intelligence. No single command structure to target, no central weakness to exploit. Every ship is both independent and part of the whole." A student raised a hand. "Instructor, the reports say the humans suffered minimal casualties. How is that possible when they were outnumbered?" The instructor was quiet for a moment. Memories of that battle still fresh despite months of trying to forget. They were not fighting to win glory or territory. They were fighting to rescue their civilians and punish those who had attacked them. That gave them focus we lacked. Also, their technology was more advanced than we believed. But mostly it was their willingness to do whatever was necessary. They used damaged ships as weapons. They ignored our surrender offers until they had achieved total